Hi, Sherry. So for my final exams, I will be going for option 3, and it's about storytelling. I'll be talking about group healing as well as generational resilience. I cannot talk about those two without mentioning the impact of colonization. We all know how colonization destroyed and damaged a lot of indigenous people as well as their culture. One major area that I want to focus on for the purpose of this exam is parenting. So when the colonizers came, they forcefully take away children from their parents and force them to get Western education. They deprive them of a good relationship with their parents. They deprive their parents of showing how much they could care and parent their children. Parenting was a huge flop in the indigenous community, and this is not the indigenous people's fault. This is based on the impact of colonization. A lot of parents do not know how to parent their children, and these children grew up to become parents, and they themselves do not know how to become parents because they did not experience what proper upbringing should be like. Now, this is where it comes to generational resilience. But before we talk about generational resilience, let's talk about generational trauma. Now, the parents could not parent the children. The children have grown up to become parents, and they do not know how to parent their own children. It becomes a generational issue from one generation to another. It takes someone who is ready. And when I say ready, mentally, physically, in every way ready to get healing. And it's not that easy for everyone. A lot of us are going through that healing. And I want people to understand that the journey of healing is not a final destination. The journey of healing is not a final destination because we will get triggered along the way. Once in a while, we will get triggered. And when we get triggered, that is when our test of healing is tested. Yes, that is when our healing is tested. Let me put it that way. Anyways, for me, I grew up in an African home. And I grew up in a family where my father married 3 wives. So I come from a polygamy family. Everybody knows how that works out. It never works out great. You live with one woman, you know that it can be challenging. Then you live with 3 women. It's a lot. It was chaotic. Growing up as a child in a polygamy home introduced me to trauma that I did not know that I have, which is childhood trauma. Introduced me to sibling rivalry. Introduced me to sibling competition, even unhealthy competition. Because as kids, we could see that among our parents, the wife competing unhealthily to win the heart of the man, and the other wife competing unhealthily to win the heart of the other man. It was a bitter experience. It was chaotic. But as I grew older, I was determined to not be impacted by my past or by what my family stood for. Unfortunately, I ended up being a single parent myself. And at some point, I began to parent my children the way I was parented. Then I realized this is not working out. This is not the life my children signed up for. I, as a child, did not sign up for that life. And I put myself in the picture of my kids, like when I was yelled at, when I was physically abused. How did that make me feel? It made me feel bad. It made me feel less of a person. It made me feel withdrawn. It made me feel depressed. So that is how my kids felt when I treated them like that. So talking about generational trauma, how it is passed down, I have experienced that. So I understand how the indigenous people feel. In Module 10, it talked about group work and community development, which brings me to the fact that one of the reasons I was motivated and inspired to establish a nonprofit that caters to children with developmental disabilities is because of the impact of what community can do in the realm of healing. So we created Queenie's Toy Library for children with developmental disabilities. And when we're working on our data, we found out that most of the parents of these children are single mothers as well as single fathers, for which brought us to establishing a different program specifically for single parents, and it's called the Single Parent Healing Circle. When we come together as one and we share our stories, it helps us feel better. So when I'm triggered during my healing journey, it is when I speak it out and say, this is not who I am, this is not where I belong. It makes me affirm my reality. That is just one self-care tactic that works for me. It could be something else for some other people. And there's so much confidentiality in the group. I do not have permission to share everybody's journey. But one thing brings us together: community, connection. Where we come together, we begin to understand that we are not alone in this journey. It makes us know that one person's pain is everybody's pain, and we bear it together. And when we bear it together, it heals. Because when we share, the other person knows that this is not a competition. This is a sisterhood where they can be themselves. This is a safe space where when they say, oh, this was what I did and this is what I am going through, they know that half of the people in that room are actually going through the same thing. So they feel safe. And then I go back to Module 11, which talks about the integration of concepts. As an Indigenous social worker, you cannot work in the Indigenous community without fully understanding the cultural context of the Indigenous people. The medicine wheel is my go-to place for everything Indigenous. I understand it to a reasonable extent, and I use it to address Indigenous issues as it pertains to an individual. You have to put yourself in their shoes to fully grasp what they're going through. It's not an easy journey. No, it is not. Which brings me to the end. For any social worker who is working in the Indigenous community, please align your values to the cultural context of Indigenous people. Understand it, put yourself in their shoes, engage the use of traditional rulers. That is an excellent way to heal, to project healing for any individual that you're working with. Elders are respectable people in the Indigenous community. In everything that we do, there has to be an elder from the Indigenous community, because that way, that Indigenous person feels seen and they feel understood. And that is when they will value your work as a social worker. Thank you.